I, 35 farads, am at my absolute breaking point with my family's blatant favoritism and complete disregard for my achievements. Today's my 35th birthday, and guess what? Not a single happy birthday from any of them, not one word. And to top it off, I'm racing against the clock to submit my dissertation, but does anyone in my family care? Of course not. They're too busy fawning over my deadbeat twin brother's latest business venture. Let me paint you a picture of the dysfunction I've been dealing with my entire life. My family's loaded, thanks to the textile import-export business my grandfather built from the ground up. My father took over, and you'd think that would be a blessing, right? Wrong. It's been nothing but a curse for me. From the moment we were born, it was clear who the favorite was. My twin brother, the golden child. Even as kids, the divide was obvious. Our 5th birthday party, he got a miniature sports car he could drive around the yard. I got a chemistry set that was promptly taken away because it was too dangerous. That pretty much set the tone for the rest of our lives. My brother, he's the textbook definition of failing upwards. Dropped out of college after a semester because it was too stressful. Now he lives the life of a playboy, and my parents eat it up like he's God's gift to the world. Meanwhile, I've been busting my ass in a computer science program, focusing on AI ethics and its application in supply chain management. You know, something that could actually benefit the family business. But it's like I'm invisible to them. My mother is the worst. She's so materialistic it makes me sick. All she cares about is my brother's social talents and her latest designer purchases. Give me a break. My academic success, it might as well not exist in her eyes. I still remember when I got my first paper published in a prestigious journal. I was over the moon, thinking, finally, they'll see my worth now. What a joke. My mother's response, that's nice, dear. Did you hear about your brother's new yacht? A yacht, for a guy who's never worked a day in his life. And my father, he's so wrapped up in the business that family comes second, or maybe 5th, who knows. The one time he showed interest in my work, it was to ask if my computer hobby could help cut costs in the company. Hobby. Can you believe it? I wanted to scream, it's not a hobby, it's my career, my passion, my future. But of course, I just smiled and nodded, like the good, invisible daughter I am. The only saving grace in this mess are my grandparents. They're the only ones who see me, who understand and support me. My grandmother always says, your mind is your greatest asset, dear. Don't let anyone dim your light. Without them, I don't know where I'd be. Probably not in this program, that's for sure. They're the ones who encouraged me to apply, who helped me with the application fees when my parents refused. Today was the last straw. My family completely ignored my birthday because of my brother's business meeting. More like another excuse for him to party with his trust fund buddies. I'm seething with anger and disappointment. How am I supposed to focus on my dissertation when I'm being crushed under the weight of my family's indifference? Speaking of my dissertation, let me tell you about it, since no one in my family bothers to ask. I'm developing an AI-driven ethical framework for supply chain management. It's groundbreaking stuff. My algorithm can predict potential ethical violations in supply chains with 95% accuracy, from labor violations to environmental impacts. It could revolutionize the industry, make businesses more responsible, and potentially save companies millions in avoided scandals and lawsuits. You'd think my father would be interested, right? His company could be at the forefront of ethical business practices. But no, he's more concerned with my brother's latest harebrained scheme to start a luxury pet spa on a cruise ship. I wish I was joking. Last week, I tried to explain how my work could benefit the family business. My father's response, that's nice, honey, but let's focus on real business solutions. Real business solutions, as if preventing child labor and environmental disasters isn't real enough. The past few weeks have been a nightmare. I've been pulling all-nighters, fine-tuning my models, running simulations, writing and rewriting. My advisor says it's some of the most promising work he's seen in years. But every time I call home for some support, all I hear about is my brother's latest escapade. or my mother's new Botox appointment. I remember last Thanksgiving, I tried to explain my research to my family over dinner. I was excited, passionate, thinking maybe if they understood, they'd finally be proud. My father checked his phone 3 times during my explanation. My mother interrupted to ask if I'd considered doing something with makeup instead. And my brother? He laughed and said, "Sis, no one cares about computers except nerds. They don't realize that the nerds they mock are shaping the future of their precious business world." You know what really gets me? This isn't just about a birthday or a dissertation. This is years and years of unfair treatment coming to a head. I've always been the responsible one, the achiever. I'm on the verge of earning a P for crying out loud. But in my family's eyes, that's nothing compared to my brother's ability to schmooze at parties. Let me give you a few more examples of the crap I've had to deal with. When I won a national coding competition in high school, my parents didn't even come to the award ceremony. Why? Because my brother had a soccer game. He was a bench warmer. When I got accepted into my undergrad program with a full scholarship, my mother's first response was, "But how will you meet a nice boy if you're always studying?" Last year, when I presented at a major tech conference, my father promised he'd come. He canceled at the last minute because my brother needed help bailing his latest startup out of debt. I'm sitting here, surrounded by research papers, my computer screen blurring as I fight back tears of frustration. How am I supposed to concentrate on complex algorithms when all I can think about is how little I matter to my own family? I've got simulations running in the background, crunching data that could change the face of ethical business practices, and all I can hear is my mother's voice saying, "When are you going to find a nice man and settle down? I've sacrificed so much for this." Weekends spent in the lab while my friends were out having fun. Relationships that fizzled because I was too focused on my work. Sleepless nights, stress-induced migraines, the constant pressure to prove myself in a male-dominated field. And for what? To be treated like an afterthought by the people who are supposed to support me the most. The irony is, my work could revolutionize the very industry my family's business operates in. I've developed AI models that could streamline supply chains, predict market trends with unprecedented accuracy, all while ensuring ethical compliance. But do they care? No, because it's not as flashy as my brother's latest get-rich-quick scheme. I'm at a crossroads now. Part of me wants to just give up, to stop trying to impress people who will never appreciate me. But another part of me is angry, determined to succeed despite them, to shove my accomplishments in their faces. But here's the kicker. Even if I do that, will it change anything? Will they suddenly wake up and realize how unfairly they've treated me all these years? I doubt it. I'm scared. Scared that I'm going to lose everything I've worked for, my P, my self-respect, maybe even the last shreds of my relationship with my family. But I'm also angry. Angry enough to push through, to finish this dissertation out of spite if nothing else. The deadline is looming. I have less than a week to finalize everything, and I'm nowhere near as focused as I need to be. My mind keeps drifting to the party I can hear in the background when I call home. The laughter, the clinking of glasses, the sound of my brother's voice booming over it all. And here I am, alone in my tiny apartment, surrounded by empty coffee cups and takeout containers, trying to change the world while my family celebrates the fact that my brother managed to not screw up for a whole month. Let me give you a glimpse into my daily life right now. I wake up at 6 o'clock after maybe 4 hours of sleep and chug coffee. By 7 o'clock, I'm already running simulations on my latest model. At 9 o'clock, I have a virtual meeting with my advisor, trying not to look as exhausted as I feel. From 10 o'clock to 6 o'clock, it's a blur of writing, debugging, rewriting, and running more simulations. I usually forget to eat lunch. Around 6 o'clock, I remember I'm human and need food, so I order takeout. From 7 o'clock to 2 o'clock, it's more writing, more debugging, and questioning all my life choices. At 2 o'clock, I fall asleep at my desk, again, and then I rinse and repeat. every single day. And you know what the worst part is? I love my work. I truly do. I believe in what I'm doing. I think it could make a real difference in the world. But it's so hard to hold on to that passion when I'm constantly being torn down by my own family. I need advice, Reddit. How do I navigate this? How do I focus on my work when my emotions are in such turmoil? How do I deal with a family that's been emotionally neglecting me for years? Should I confront them? Should I just cut ties and move on? And the biggest question of all, once I get through this, once I have that pea in my hands, what then? Do I try to implement my research in the family business, proving my worth once and for all? Do I strike out on my own, maybe start a consulting firm? Or do I take a job offer from a tech giant on the other side of the country and never look back? I've got options, at least career-wise. A few major tech companies have already expressed interest in my work. There's a startup in Silicon Valley that's practically begging me to join them, and part of me is tempted to take one of these offers, to move far away and build a life completely separate from my family. But another part of me feels like that would be letting them win. Like I'd be admitting that I don't belong in their world. And maybe it's stupid. Maybe it's self-destructive. But I want to belong. I want them to see me, to be proud of me, to value me as much as they value my brother. Is that too much to ask? To be valued by your own family? To have your achievements recognized? To be seen as more than just the family disappointment? I'm lost. I'm hurt. I'm angry. And I'm so tired of fighting for scraps of attention and approval. Any advice would be appreciated. How do I move forward from here? How do I find the strength to finish this dissertation when I feel so defeated? And most importantly, how do I start valuing myself when my own family never has? I feel like I'm at a breaking point, like something's got to give. I just don't know what that something is yet. Will it be my relationship with my family, my career aspirations, my sense of self-worth? I'm terrified to find out. So Reddit, what do I do? How do I salvage my sanity, finish this dissertation, and deal with a family that seems determined to ignore everything I've worked for? I'm all ears, because right now, I feel like I'm drowning, and I don't know how much longer I can keep my head above water. Update 1. It's been 2 weeks since my last post, and to say a lot has happened would be an understatement. I'm still trying to process everything, but I felt I owed you all an update after the overwhelming support I received. So, here goes. First things first, I submitted my dissertation. It was a grueling final push, fueled by too much coffee and the anger I felt towards my family. But it's done. My advisor thinks it has a good chance of passing with distinction, but I'm trying not to get my hopes up. I'll defend it in a month, and then, hopefully, I'll officially be Dr. Invisible Daughter. Not that my family would care. Speaking of my family, this is where things get complicated. Remember how I mentioned my grandparents were the only ones who supported me? Well, my grandfather decided to make that support tangible in a way I never expected. The day after I submitted my dissertation, I got a call from my grandfather. He wanted to meet me for lunch. Just the two of us. I was exhausted, but I couldn't say no to him. When I arrived at the restaurant, I found not just my grandfather, but also his lawyer. My grandfather looked at me with a mix of pride and sadness in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said, "but your achievements have gone unrecognized for so long. I'm going to fix that." Then he slid a document across the table. It was his will. He had changed it, substantially. Instead of splitting his estate equally between my father and his grandchildren, my brother and me, as was the original plan, he's now leaving the majority of it to me. A significant portion will go to funding a scholarship for women in STEM fields, which will be managed by me. My brother's share has been reduced to a small trust fund that he can only access if he completes a college degree or starts a legitimate business. My father's share remains the same, but with the stipulation that the company must implement ethical business practices based on my research or forfeit the inheritance. I was stunned. I am still stunned. This is life-changing money we're talking about. The kind of money that could fund my own research for years, or start my own ethical AI consulting firm, or the possibilities are endless. But here's the thing. I'm not sure how to feel about this. On one hand, I'm incredibly touched by my grandfather's gesture. He's not just giving me money, he's validating my work, my choices, my very existence in a way my parents never have. For the first time in my life, I feel seen and valued by a member of my family, other than my grandmother, of course. On the other hand, I'm terrified of what this means for my already strained family relationships. My grandfather swore me to secrecy. The rest of the family doesn't know about the changes yet. He plans to tell them at a family dinner next week. I'm dreading it. Part of me feels guilty. Am I stealing my brother's birthright? But then I remember all the years of favoritism, all the times my accomplishments were ignored while his failures were celebrated, and the guilt fades a bit. Still, I can't help but worry about how this will affect him. Despite everything, he's still my twin. And my parents? I'm almost certain this will destroy any chance of reconciliation. They'll see this as a betrayal, both by me and by my grandfather. I can already hear my mother's voice, accusing me of manipulating an old man, of being greedy and selfish. But you know what? A small, vengeful part of me is looking forward to it. Is that terrible? To want them to finally acknowledge me, even if it's through anger, to finally have something they can't ignore or dismiss. I'm also worried about the pressure this puts on me. My grandfather is essentially betting on me to carry on his legacy, to make a difference in the world. What if I can't live up to that? What if my research doesn't pan out in the real world? What if I'm not cut out for running a scholarship fund or implementing ethical practices in a major corporation? These thoughts have been swirling in my head for days now. I've barely slept. I've been alternating between manic excitement at the possibilities this opens up and paralyzing anxiety about the fallout. I did have one moment of pure joy, though. I called my grandmother to thank her for everything she and my grandfather have done for me. She laughed and said, "Oh, sweetie, did you think we didn't notice how brilliant you are? We've been planning this for years. We always knew you were the one who would take this family into the future." That made me cry. Happy tears, for once. So now, I'm stuck in this strange limbo. My dissertation is submitted, but I can't fully celebrate because of this looming family drama. I have an incredible opportunity ahead of me, but I'm terrified of the cost it might come with. I'm trying to focus on the positives. I've started sketching out plans for the scholarship fund. I'm thinking about how I could implement my ethical AI framework in my father's company. I'm even considering reaching out to some of those tech companies that were interested in my work to see if they'd be open to a consulting arrangement rather than full-time employment. But every time I start to feel excited, I remember that family dinner next week. The thought of facing my parents and my brother, of seeing their reactions when they learn about the will. It makes me feel physically ill. I know I should be happy. This is validation on a scale I never expected. This is the opportunity of a lifetime. But why does it feel like I'm about to lose my family all over again? I could really use some advice, Reddit. How do I navigate this new reality? How do I balance my excitement for the future with the dread of what's to come? How do I face my family? And most importantly, how do I make the most of this opportunity without letting the fear and guilt consume me? I feel like I'm standing on the edge of a cliff. On one side is everything I've ever wanted: recognition, opportunity, the chance to make a real difference. On the other side is the abyss of family estrangement and overwhelming responsibility, and I have to choose which way to jump. So, what would you do in my shoes? How do I prepare for this family dinner? How do I move forward from here? Thank you all again for your support. I never expected my late-night rant to resonate with so many people. Your kind words and advice have been a lifeline these past 2 weeks. I hope I can continue to count on your wisdom as I navigate this new chapter of my life. Update 2. It's been about 6 months since my last update, and I feel like I've lived a lifetime in that span. So much has changed, and yet some things remain frustratingly the same. Grab a coffee, or something stronger, because this is going to be a long one. First, The professional news. I defended my dissertation and officially earned my P. It passed with distinction, just as my advisor predicted. I'm now Dr. Invisible Daughter. Not that it seems to matter much to my immediate family. But we'll get to that drama later. Remember how I mentioned that my grandfather's inheritance opened up a world of possibilities? Well, I decided to take the plunge and start my own company. I've launched an ethical AI consulting firm, focusing on implementing my research in real-world business settings. We're only 6 months old, but we've already landed contracts with 3 Fortune 500 companies and a handful of promising startups. The irony isn't lost on me that I'm now running a more successful business than my brother ever has, despite being the impractical nerd of the family. My team is small but brilliant, and watching my ideas come to life in the corporate world is exhilarating. We're making real changes, pushing companies to consider the ethical implications of their AI and supply chain practices. It's everything I've ever dreamed of, professionally speaking. I've also started setting up the scholarship fund my grandfather envisioned. We've awarded our first round of scholarships to 10 incredibly talented young women in STEM fields. Reviewing their applications, I saw so much of myself in them: the passion, the drive, the frustration with a world that often underestimates them. Being able to support them in their journey feels like I'm healing a part of my younger self. But of course, because this is my life, the professional highs are matched by personal lows. Remember that family dinner I was dreading in my last post? Well, it was every bit the disaster I anticipated, and then some. My grandfather announced the changes to his will over dessert. The silence that followed was deafening. Then, all hell broke loose. My mother burst into tears, alternating between accusing me of manipulating my grandfather and begging him to reconsider. My father's face turned an alarming shade of purple as he shouted about family loyalty and tradition. And my brother? He just sat there, staring at me with a mix of shock and hatred that I'll never forget. I tried to explain that this wasn't my doing, that I was as surprised as they were. But they weren't hearing it. My father declared that if I accepted the inheritance, I would no longer be welcome in the family home. My mother, between sobs, told me I was breaking her heart. My brother simply stood up and walked out. My grandfather tried to intervene, to explain his reasoning, but it fell on deaf ears. The evening ended with my parents and brother storming out, leaving me alone with my grandparents. I broke down then, all the stress and emotion of the past weeks pouring out of me. My grandmother held me as I cried, whispering that they would come around, that they just needed time. But they haven't. It's been 6 months, and the silence from my parents and brother has been absolute. They haven't returned my calls or emails. They didn't attend my P defense. They don't know about my company. As far as I can tell, they're pretending I don't exist. It hurts, more than I can express. Despite years of neglect and favoritism, they're still my family. I still love them, as messed up as that might be. There are moments when something good happens at work, and for a split second, I think about calling my mom to share the news. Then I remember I can't. The rational part of my brain knows I've done nothing wrong. I'm using this opportunity to make a difference, to help others, to build something meaningful. But there's still that little girl inside me who just wants her parents' approval, who feels guilty for stealing her brother's inheritance. My grandparents have been my rock through all of this. They call regularly, visit when they can, and have been endlessly supportive of my new venture. But I know the rift in the family is weighing on them too. My grandmother let slip that my parents aren't speaking to them either. I can't help but feel responsible for tearing the family apart. On the business front, things are complicated too. Remember how my grandfather stipulated that my father's company had to implement ethical practices based on my research? Well, they're dragging their feet. My father seems to view it as a personal insult rather than an opportunity for positive change. I've reached out multiple times, offering to work with them on implementation, but I've been met with silence or curt refusals from the company's legal team. It's frustrating because I can see so clearly how my work could benefit their business. They're facing increasing scrutiny over their supply chain practices, and my AI models could help them get ahead of potential issues. But my father's pride seems to be getting in the way of good business sense. I've thrown myself into my work to cope with all of this. My company is thriving, but I'm exhausted. I'm working 80-hour weeks, juggling client meetings, research, and the scholarship fund. I barely sleep, and I can't remember the last time I did something just for fun. My grandmother keeps telling me I need to slow down, to take care of myself. But how can I slow down when work is the only thing keeping me sane? There have been moments of light in all this darkness, though. Last month, I was invited to give a TED Talk about ethical AI and its potential to transform business practices. As I stood on that stage, sharing my research and my vision with the world, I felt a sense of validation that no family approval could match. The video has since gone viral, and I've been flooded with messages from people inspired by my work. I've also started mentoring some of the scholarship recipients, watching them grow and thrive, hearing about their breakthroughs and challenges. It gives me a sense of purpose beyond just the day-to-day of running my company. In them, I see the future I'm fighting for. A world where brilliant women in STEM are recognized and supported from the start. But at the end of the day, when the work is done and the accolades fade, I'm left with this gnawing emptiness. I've achieved more in the past 6 months than I ever thought possible, but the cost has been so high. I find myself wondering if it's worth it. Would I give it all up to have my family back? Some days, the answer terrifies me. I'm trying to stay positive, to focus on the good I'm doing and the opportunities I have, but I can't shake this feeling that something's got to give. I'm stretched so thin, trying to be a CEO, a researcher, a mentor, and a granddaughter, all while dealing with the emotional fallout of my family situation. I'm worried that if something doesn't change soon, I'm going to burn out completely. So, Reddit, I find myself once again in need of your advice. How do I balance all of these competing demands on my time and emotions? Is there any hope of reconciling with my family? Or do I need to accept that this estrangement might be permanent? How do I deal with the guilt of my success, knowing it's come at the cost of my family relationships? And perhaps most importantly, how do I find peace with my choices? How do I silence that voice in my head that still, after everything, craves my parents' approval? I'm proud of what I've accomplished, but I'm also more alone than I've ever been. Is this what success feels like? Because if it is, I'm not sure I like it. Thank you all again for your support. Your advice has been a lifeline through all of this, and I'm more grateful than I can express. Here's hoping that the next update, whenever it comes, will have more resolutions and fewer complications. But knowing my life, I wouldn't bet on it.